Hello everybody, my name is Michael, and in today's video what we're going to be doing is this right here. So if that looks exciting to you guys, please carry on and watch the video. Oh, and just one more thing before we go. Please consider like, commenting, and subscribing if you enjoyed the video. But now with all that out of the way, let's carry on with the video. Okay, so with our chieftain here, you can see that I've given him a zenithal prime, and I've just put a bit of texture onto the base. Zenithal prime is where you come in with a black primer, and then you come in with a white spray primer or whatever you need over top so you can see those highlights and where the sun is naturally coming in. And then we're going to be starting off with some barbarian flesh to start painting up his skin. And of course, there's only a couple of areas that we need to do it on this model, which is just the face and the hand. So giving a nice overall coat into those areas. Then once we have his skin painted up, what we're going to be doing now is we're going to come in with some crystal blue. And for the crystal blue, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be painting up his cloak. So keeping the paint nice and thin so we can maximize that zenithal highlights in here, is we want to be just giving a nice good overall coat of the cloak. Now getting into all those nice tight areas, because it does go right up underneath his arm, so you can switch to a smaller brush if you need to, but my brush is okay enough to get over all the areas that we need. And remember to pay a little bit of time, go over in 2 or 3 coats if you need to, because it is a big flat area as well. Then once we have his cloak painted up, we're going to come in now with some charred brown. Charred brown we're just going to be using in one pretty small spot. We're just going to be painting up his boots here and his scabbard to hold his sword in as well. So coming in with just a small brush to do this. Then once we have his boots and his sword scabbard picked out, we're going to come in now with some mahogany brown. And with the mahogany brown, what we're going to be doing is we're just going to be picking out his pants that he has on here, his trousers, his sort of underclothes he has underneath his nice long top we want on there. So just getting in there, and you can see there's some hard to reach spaces in there. So if you need a smaller tip brush or maneuver it around as awkwardly as possible, don't be afraid to do that as well. Then once we have his pants picked out, we're going to come in now with some voidshield blue, which is a nice bright blue, and we're going to be placing this on the main part of his main sort of coat slash shirt slash padded armor, whatever he has on here. But we want to be missing that big piece in the center of his chest. So it's actually a piece of armor, maybe a little bit hard to tell in the video here, but it's actually like a breastplate he's wearing. So we just want to be doing his arms and the actual skirt part itself with the voidshield blue in this case. Then once we have those bits picked out, we're going to come in now with some mummy robes. And we're going to be using the mummy robes for the wrappings around his arms, as well as the wrapping around his legs as well. So don't forget to do the legs too while you're painting this up, giving a nice overall coat. Now remember, mummy robes or an off-white is very thin, so go over it in a couple of coats too as well. Being careful to make sure we get it into all the little nooks and crannies, but since we have that nice zenithal highlight on there, we can afford to be a little bit okay in those areas and have it a little bit thin so we can see those nice deep shadows in the actual zenithal prime as well. Then once we have all those wrappings picked out, we're going to come in now with some skeleton bone, and we're going to be using the skeleton bone in a couple of places. We're actually going to start off by using it just here where he has a nice sort of fur wrapping around his chest. We'll come in there, and we also want to be making sure we give a nice good overall coverage in this area, because it's a lot of foldy and wavy bits of hair in there, so you want to make sure you definitely get a good coat over those bits as well. And then on top of that, we also want to make sure we give a nice good overall coat to his actual hair as well. So remember, again, we want to use the skeleton bones, because I'm going to be giving him a blonde hair color. Now again, this is up to you what color you want to make it, but if you want to go for a blonde hair color, skeleton bone is a nice good easy way to get a good blonde hair color as well. So picking out all those spots, and we'll make those spots visually distinct between the hair and the fur with washes later on, which will help separate them out a little bit since they're the same color right now. Then once we have the hair and the fur picked out, we're going to come in now with some black grey. And what we're going to be doing with the black grey is we're just going to be picking out his belt along his chest that you can see here. So being very careful, it's a very sort of fine belt, so come in with a smaller brush if you need to, and just pick out the areas of the belt. Then once we have his belt picked out, we're going to come in now with some retributor armour. And retributor armour is a nice gold colour, so we're going to be placing this pretty much everywhere we want the armour. So we want the helmet, and just up the spine of the wings that he has on his helmet as well. We want to be leaving those feathers on the side alone. That nice breastplate that I was talking about before, that can be easily dismissed and easily painted over as just part of the actual shirt color itself, but that's a nice breastplate we want to go with there. And we also want to be just picking out the sort of little buttons and domes and bits of finishing details on the model, showing that he's got some nice gold sort of like filigree and stuff on there as well. Then once we have all those gold bits picked out, we're going to come in now with some gun metal, and this is only going to be used in pretty much one small place, and that's to be doing up the blade of his sword here. But I am going to also just put a nice bit of the gun metal just on his dot, on his main sort of showy centerpiece of his belt as well. So we've got that gold in the background, then it'll be a nice silver dot on top of that, just to add in a little bit more color. Then with the blade of his sword painted up, we're going to come in now with some ivory. And what we're going to be doing with the ivory is we're just going to come in and pick out those feathers that he has on his helmet there. So these are going to be very sort of a pain to paint in because they've got a lot of texture on them and they're all very jammed together. So just spend your time, thin down your paint a little bit to help flow it into those areas a little bit better. And really take your time, but don't get your paint too thin so it starts running everywhere all over the piece. Just be very controlled with this place and take your time. Okay, so we're going to start moving on to some washes now, and we're going to start off with some reikland fleshshade. And we're going to be, of course, painting this, or I should say washing this, over the areas where we want that nice gold to stand out in a super saturated gold tone. As well as that, we also, of course, since it is a skin tone, want to be placing it over the skin as well. And the retributor armor being a flesh wash with a bit of sort of red pigment and stuff in it is going to really help accentuate the gold color and give it a more realistic gold appearance as well. Then once we have that retributor armor all dried up, we're going to move on with a new wash here. We're going to come in with some seraphim sepia. And the seraphim sepia, what we want to be doing is we're going to be applying it just over our chieftain's wrappings to give it a sort of worn down over time use that he's been using in the battlefield. As well as that, we also want to be placing it on his hair as well. And it's going to, since we've got that skeleton bone color in there with that slight yellowish off-white color, it's going to really help emphasize the blonde sort of appearance that we want to go for with his nice blonde hair. It's going to really help accentuate all that as well. So being very careful and very selective where we're placing this wash. Then once that wash is completely dried, we're going to come in now with some agrax earthshade. And this is just going to be going on a couple of places. We're going to be placing the agrax earthshade over that fur he has on his chest, as well as any of the brown areas that we have. So we want to make sure we get on the boots, his trousers, and just making sure that we keep it localized to those areas. We do not want to be applying it to his cape and his sort of overcoat he has on there as well, just to the boots and the pants mainly. Then once that's all dried up, what we're going to be doing now is coming in with some blue tone. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be applying the blue tone just to his clothing that he's wearing on and not his cape. So just the blue clothing, so his nice little skirt here and of course his parts of his sleeves as well. So that's going to really help enrich those blues on there, but we're going to be leaving the cloak alone because we want to keep some difference in color, and if we put the blue wash on there as well, they would become very, very similar very quickly. So we want to avoid that, and we're just applying it just to the clothing, not the cape. And then once that's dry, we can move on to his cloak slash cape, and we're going to come in with some nuln oil for that, and so it's going to help darken that down, really separate out those colors, and going to give that nice sort of vibrant, really vibrant deep blue onto his clothing that he's wearing. And then his cape is going to be a nice worn battle colored sort of cape that he wears quite often, But as well as that, as you can see that I'm doing here as well, we also want to be getting it into the areas of the feathers on his helmet as well, making sure that it's going to really help pick out all those lovely sculpted bits of detail in his feathers, so that you can see the feathers quite clearly in the sculpt. So it's going to look really, really nice once we have all those dried up as well. And then with all those washes applied, we can start moving on to the highlighting stage. So starting off with skeleton bone here, and all we're going to be doing with this is we're just going to be giving it a highlighting to his hair. So only the areas where we have his hair, not the place where we place the fur on his belt. We're going to be leaving that entirely alone and just keeping it with the wash. But we're just going to be using skeleton bone to highlight up the hairs to keep those differences in mind. And then once we've done that to the way you would like, we're going to come back in now with some mummy robes. And of course we want to be highlighting the areas that we did originally in the mummy robes, which is his wrist wrappings and the wrappings around his feet as well. Just really catching the edges where the sun would naturally hit. It's going to help give a nice effect, as you can see here. And of course the parts of his legs as well that are also covered in the wrappings, we're just getting it onto those high points too. Then with those wrappings picked out, we're going to come in now with some mahogany brown again, and we're just going to be hitting those high points of the trousers. And this sculpt has some nice and easy folds that are nice and picked out on the trousers here, so you can clearly see where we want to be placing these highlights, which is going to be nice and easy for us and really give us a helping hand in sorting out where we want the sun to naturally be hitting with the highlights. Then once we've done that, what we're going to do now is we're going to come in with some voidshield blue, which is the blue that we use for his skirt that we've got here and his arms, so the main part of his clothing and not his cloak. We want to be leaving that alone because we're going to be using a different blue for that, as we have constantly separated out those two blues, and hopefully give off the end effect that we've got two different blues in the way they react to the sun with the different colors that we've applied. And you can see with that blue highlighted up, we've got that nice bright blue. So now we can come in with our crystal blue, which is a bit of a deeper colored blue, and of course we can apply it to the nice highlights we have on this cloak slash cape here. And you can see it's got some nice big folds and curves and stuff in there, so some nice easy places to see where to pick out the highlights that we want here. So it's just a matter of time spent going over these areas, slowly applying that paint until you get to the brightness that you really want with this piece. So don't be afraid to give it all a nice highlighting here on all these nice big folds and wrinkles. And now with this cape picked out, what we're going to be doing is coming back in with some retributor armour, and we want to be applying it to the areas where of course the sun will naturally hit and give that nice big shining effect, like the gold is shining in the sunlight, and he's preparing for battle. So there is a nice little raised sort of design in the center of his chest here, so I'm going to be picking that out as well, so you can clearly see that on our gold here. And of course we want to do the edges and the nice big flats of his spines of his wings. I'm not quite sure exactly what you call them, but yeah, the spiny parts of the wings before it feathers out into those feathers, and of course in the front part of the helmet as well. And then once we have that, all we need to do is come back in with some barbarian flesh and pick out the high points of our miniature here. So we want to be picking out places like the nose, the knuckles, the flat of his thumb that we can see here, nice and shining out in the sun. And the barbarian flesh, since we've got our flesh wash on here, is going to highlight up in a nice subtle way and give that effect, especially from a distance, that it's reflecting off the sun. And with all that out of the way, we have finally finished painting up our Gallic Celt Chieftain from the Hail Caesar game by Warlord Games. So I hope this tutorial has been helpful for you guys, whether you want to follow along or you just enjoy me painting up some cool miniatures. So I'd like to thank you once again, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next video.